Hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Around the Octagon. We have a packed crew today. We are joined by our article man, Dan. Dan, nice for you to join us today. First time on the show. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I had a long day at work. I'm ready to unwind, talk some fights. Let's do it.
100%. And circling back a little bit to last week, there was a pretty nice fight night in which Kamaru Usman took out Joaquin Buckley 49-46, UD in pretty dominant fashion. I don't think any of us necessarily expected that. All of our predictions here were for Buckley. Dan, I don't know if you were on the other side there, if you were also on Buckley. But
Yeah.
with that being said, the welterweight division just got completely shooken up, and now it's kind of a big question mark in my mind. And Luke, I'll let you start this. If you had to go through and match make the welterweight division, I guess starting with Kamaru Usman, what's next for him? And how does the rest of that division really shake out with the matchmaking?
Yeah, I think it makes it even tougher than the last time we talked about it. Obviously, Islam is still going to get that shot for the belt, but with Kamaru's age and his legacy in that division, it's kind of hard to not put into conversation him jumping everyone else for the title. I still think there's a bunch of guys below that definitely can compete for the title and are worthy if they were to give that fight. You got Shavkat in there, you got Ian Gary, who took a bunch of short notices, is in good standing with the UFC. So it's going to be interesting. I would like to see, Kamaru, if they're not going to have him wait for a title shot, I would like to see him against the one or two. Right now I'm looking at the rankings, be Bilal or Sean Brady. I would be fine with either of those fights. But also would be fine if they just gave it to Kamaru one last hurrah before he hangs him up.
Yeah, definitely on the same page here. The one that really stuck out to me was Ian Gary because I think if that Sean Brady fight doesn't happen between him and Gary, uh, he's kind of just in a no man's land right there. For Buckley is what I was thinking actually. Sorry, not Usman. For Buckley, I think Ian Gary would be a perfect matchup. Now Usman, I really think like a Bilal fight would be great, but honestly, like I don't think there's too much doubt after the Buckley fight. I mean, maybe he wasn't the highest ranked guy, but I do think he can jump and go ahead and take that championship out. I mean, I don't think there'd be too many mad faces around the fans if that happens. So he obviously made me eat my words. I was really heavily on Buckley last week, and so Usman absolutely blew me away with his performance that weekend. But yeah, I don't hate a direct title shot here, especially since I think Buckley was, if he would have won, he would have got a title shot off that fight. So I think that makes a good argument for Kamaru to go ahead and take that.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree. You guys summed it up. I think I'd rather see. I know Usman's pretty much content on now just sitting out and waiting. He has no problem waiting, just to get that next title shot. There is some historic beef between him and Bilal Muhammad. They filmed a podcast together with him and Henry Cejudo, and they never posted it because him and Usman got into it. Like a little physical altercation. I'm assuming just some shoving. I doubt any punches were thrown. So I feel maybe Usman would be up to that fight if Bilal, just starts calling him out. You could run that. And then I saw today there's something about Shavkat, who we've been talking about, who's waiting in the wings. Apparently he hasn't fought in like 500 something days. Actually, no, never mind. I'm reading that now. That was fake. It got me. I'm looking. He fought in December of 2024. But
Still a long time.
with the missed bouts, the canceled fights, and with all this movement going on in the welterweight division, I wouldn't also mind seeing a Shavkat versus Sean Brady, for instance. And you could also toss up that Joaquin Buckley, Ian Gary fight. Obviously, that division's still going to be stalled. They have to announce that Jack Della Maddalena Islam fight. But a lot of ways you can go here. Definitely not a stagnant division at all. I mean, just in terms of like who's getting the next title shot, you got 3 or 4 guys you could just, pull out of a hat. And like I said before, you'd be fine. I think the fans would be fine with any single one of them. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah. I mean, I really have to give Kamaru Usman his flowers because he is very much like my dishes currently. He is not washed. So, I mean, I definitely have to give him his props there. I think in terms of, I agree with, I think it was San. I think him and Bilal Muhammad I'm sorry, Ryan as well. Him and Bilal Muhammad, obviously you have that history that the fans would want to see. Everybody wants to know what went down on that podcast. And I think they're somewhat similar. I mean, they're very grappling heavy, and they're also kind of at a similar point in their careers in that they're getting a little bit older now. They're both former champions. They're both, kind of in, one more fight. They might be right back in title contention or even fighting for a title. I think Joaquin Buckley and Ian Gary, kind of similar to Usman and Belal. There's a little bit of drama there. Those two have gone back and forth before. I know Joaquin Buckley's posted a little bit of instigation towards Ian Gary. I think those two kind of have some animosity. That would certainly be a fight that would be fun for the fans. And I think also the welterweight division is it's really turned a corner. I remember a couple years ago, like it was kind of stagnant in a way, but now like there's a lot of exciting new talent. It's very top heavy. There's at least 5 guys at the top that could all be fighting for a title, and I don't think anybody would be upset by it. You have Shavkat, you have Buckley, you have Ian Gary, you have obviously Kamaru Usman now. Like there's so many good fights, and you could all have them fight each other. And I don't think anybody would argue that any one of those guys are not deserving.
Yeah, I think about all of them are deserving, which makes almost none of them deserving in a way, if that makes any sense there, where you just have so many people sitting there towards the top. I would like to see almost all of them kind of fight again, and I think they could match it up pretty well. I do like that Belal Muhammad Kamaru Usman fight. You can give the winner of that the title shot of JDM versus Islam. And then I guess the question is, what do you do with Shavkat? I would like to see him fight Sean Brady. I know Sean Brady's called for that fight a few times. And then it leaves you the question with what to do with Ian Machado Gary. And I know you guys talk about Joaquin Buckley. And while I agree, that'd be a very fun fight, and I think the fans would be interested, I just don't know if Gary will fight down in the rankings after just doing so against Carlos Prates. So I could almost see a matchup with Gary between Gary and Leon Edwards, which I think is very favorable for Gary as well. And that gives him a chance to look up in the rankings. And then for Buckley, I like the fight with Carlos Prates. I think that is a fight that all fans win. Both of those guys will both definitely get hit and get hit hard, but I think it's a very fan-friendly fight and one that I want to see. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see the welterweight division going, but they could certainly go almost any direction with it and not fuck it up. But moving on, we have a pretty good fight night this weekend, UFC Baku. I'm pretty pumped up, and we're just going to touch on the main card here. And we'll start it off with Muhammad Naimov versus Bogdan Grad. Bogdan Grad is making his second fight in the UFC after winning on the Contender Series a few fights ago. Interesting fighter, pretty good all around. Same with Muhammad Naimov, and I think this is a pretty good matchup made here by the UFC. And Son, I'll kick this one off to you and let you take it from here.
Yeah, I was a very big test to Bogdan, coming in the UFC against this guy Naimov. I think he's up for like a very good test. I mean, Naimov has let me see, I want to say 5 first-round finishes. A lot of them by knockout, a few by sub. So just a very exciting fighter out of Naimov. I definitely have a tough time betting against him, especially after his really good performances he's been putting on in the UFC. So I'm going Naimov here. I think not much else to say. I didn't really do too much digging on this one. I think it kind of just stuck out to me who I was going here. I think it's very tough. One of his first few fights on the big leagues for Bogdan to win this one. So I think the Hillman takes this one. Naimov.
Yeah, so I'm going in the opposite direction just because me personally, I'm not a very big fan of Muhammad Naimov. I remember he came to my attention when he fought Nathaniel Wood, and he kicked him in the dick 3 times. No points called, And then in the third round, and it's kind of been like a trend that I've seen with this guy, is where in the third round, Nathaniel Wood starts to lay it on him. I see the guy kind of wilting away in certain points, and that was pretty much highlighted when he fought Felipe Lima. Felipe Lima took that fight on short notice, up a weight class. Muhammad Naimov, kept the pressure, wrestling heavy against the cage, grappling and all that. And then as that fight went on, Felipe Lima goes back to his corner, and they pretty much tell the guy, look, you need a knockout or you need a submission if you're going to win this thing. And Felipe Lima absolutely delivered, one of the better prospects coming up in the bantamweight division, who is now about to fight Peyton Talbot. I'm pretty sure that just got announced later on this year. But like I said, the trend for me with this guy is that he tends to wither up and coming into the third round, and Bogdan's the type of guy to keep the pressure. He hits hard and, under pressure. And, once you get tagged a little bit, in the case of Naimov, I see him just wilting away. I mean, granted, he could coast to a 3-round unanimous decision win, but I'm laying my money on the underdog here.
Dan,
So what do you got?
I'm sorry. Oh, my glasses are just atrocious today. I'm sorry. This one's kind of a toss-up for me. I didn't really wasn't able to do too much research on this one. So I don't want to speak too out of turn here, just looking at, like win-loss records and stats alone. But this one I'm not too certain on. I'm kind of 50-50 split on
it. Yeah, I'll go. I got Naimov too, Son. I think you kind of hit it all. I am looking at the records. I know, right, you're against that Nathaniel Wood win, but before that, Jamie Malarkey performance of the night. He did beat up Eric Silva. Got him out with a leg injury, but he was beating up that leg. The Felipe Lima, yeah, obviously, I think when we look at it now, it aged well. Felipe Lima is one of the up and coming prospects. And I think he's just more of a well-rounded fighter than Bogdan here. Bogdan's very Muay Thai heavy. I think Naimov has more, ability to, he's a very explosive, stronger guy by the looks of it. He also is a great wrestler. If he's able to work in the wrestling, I think he goes to a 3-round, 30-27 victory here. So I have Naimov by decision here.
I like Naimov as well. Again, like both guys are kind of similar to me stylistically, where they both can fight everywhere. They both grapple. They both have pretty decent striking. And my thing with Naimov is that he's just very physical. And I don't see like the takedowns of Bogdan Grad necessarily being able to work with Muhammad Naimov, as he does like a lot of work in the clinch, in which Naimov is just very physical and strong in the clinch. And I just don't see him being able to create takedowns in the clinch. Like if Bogdan Grad wanted to get him to the ground, I think it'd have to be more of like an open, like a double leg, single leg kind of approach, attacking the legs, which I don't think he necessarily does too much. So I kind of see Muhammad Naimov just being able to fend off the takedowns, being a little bit better on the feet, and squeaking out a decision win, although I do think it's going to be very close. Moving on to the next fight, we're going to the lightweight division where we have Nazim Sadykhov taking on Nikolas Motta. Nazim Sadykhov is just a very fun fighter to watch. If you guys have watched him, that guy just hits like a fucking truck. So I'm actually very pumped up to see him fight. He doesn't really fight too often. So this should be a fun one. Ryan, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, Zach, I really couldn't have said it better myself. I like Nazim Sadykhov here from Azerbaijan, gets the chance to fight in his home country. Pretty much the guy's just a finisher all around. I don't remember, he went to an absolute war with Slavakos. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the guy's name, but if you know, you know. That was a good one. He took out one of the Bonfim brothers. It's kind of an awkward loss. He kicked him in the head, and then Ismail Bonfim went blind. It's one of those strange occurrences. But every time this dude steps in the octagon, he looks like a killer. Nikolas Motta is riding a 2-fight win streak as well, but I just see the more well-rounded guy here being Nazim Sadykhov. So I'll have him taking this one away.
I also have Nazim on this one. I'm going to be a little bit of a homer for this fight. I think his resume is a little bit stronger. Like you touched on, just his finishing ability. He just seems like a little bit more of a dangerous fighter, at least in my opinion. So I'm going to go with a home team advantage here with Nazim.
Yeah, I'm with. Go ahead.
Maybe Luke.
Yeah, I'm just going to make it a clean sweep 3-0. I like the guys at Alongo's gym. I mean, they're well trained. He's one of the best coaches. And like you touched on, Ryan, that Slavakos fight was practically really I watched the Terrence McKinney fight. Terrence McKinney's hard to even judge. Sometimes it looks amazing, sometimes it looks terrible. But that Slavakos fight was awesome, went obviously to a draw. And I'm just going in with the guy who's a little bit more experienced, in my opinion. But I will say Nikolas Motta, he hits hard, man. There is a very possibility that he gets a knockout here, but I think you just got to side with the more well-rounded fighter here. I'm going Sadykhov.
Yeah, I'm just going to shut the fuck up here. Sadykhov, output better, accuracy better in striking and takedown. A lot of really impressive finishes too. So Sadykhov.
Yeah, and I'll just make it the clean sweep here. What this really boiled down to me is who has the better chin, because both guys hit. And the thing with Nazim Sadykhov is he gets hit, but it seems like it doesn't really affect him that much. And he gets hit hard, but when he hits his opponent, like it seems like it just kind of shuts him down. And Nikolas Motta has been finished multiple times by knockout TKO, I believe 5. So I kind of see Nazim Sadykhov finding the chin here and walking out with a finish win. Moving on to the next fight, we're staying in the lightweight division. We have Tofiq Musayev making his UFC debut, opposing Myktybek Orolbai. Orolbai just super wrestling heavy, and there's really no tape here on Tofiq Musayev. I know he has fought in some big organizations before, but Dan, I'll let you take it from here if you have your prediction on this fight.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Orolbai here. I'm sure I'm going to butcher a name somewhere. But I just think, especially we've had, patchy mix. We've had a couple of fighters come in from different organizations that just kind of haven't really done well. And it seems like the trend, I mean, I know there's exceptions, except, for example, Kayla Harrison, but it's almost like a prove it type of situation for me. It's like almost like, okay, you can't, I don't know how they're going to stack up against UFC level competition until they actually do it. And, like you said, until they do, there's just kind of too many unknowns. At least we know Orolbai can defeat UFC level competition. He's done it. I know he's coming off a loss, but I'm still going to favor him over somebody that has yet to face somebody in the UFC, at least to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going Orolbai here. I think if anyone tuned in to his last fight against Rebecca, I think that's how you pronounce it, that fight was an absolute war, absolute banger. It could have really gone any way when split. I thought he won that fight watching it live, but I am fine with the decision. I don't think it's, in any ill faith. But just a huge fan of the way he fights. I think his toughness is really second to none at this point in his career. He's one of the tougher guys on the roster. And yeah, like you said, Dan, it's hard to root for guys coming in and fighting in their first fight, especially at like 35, 34 years old here. So I'm going Orolbai. I'm going to go by decision. I think his opponent is tough, but I think he's going to grind this one out.
Yeah, I'm with all you guys here. I think Orolbai is the safe and good call here. I think you guys touched on all the technical points, anything that we'd want to talk about on his record or on his ability. To me, it's just really a style thing. I love the caveman. I'm all about it. You see him plastered all over the internet. I want to keep the train going. Big fan of him since he's been, kind of joined the UFC and kind of, took the internet by storm because he's just a funny looking dude. And I like funny looking dudes. So I'm going Orolbai here. I'm hoping for a finish here. A sub will be awesome. But like Luke said, he does have a pretty tough opponent. Definitely a seasoned guy. Got a lot of experience under his belt. So going to be tough to get the finish, but I'm rooting Orolbai here.
Yeah, I'll make that a clean sweep here. I'm looking at Tofiq Musayev right now, and it's one thing to know is he hasn't fought since 2023, so pretty severe and extended layoff, whether that's due to injury, or just life catching up to you, and being inactive. It just sort of seems like UFC need to fill this card with some Azerbaijani fighters, and him being from Azerbaijan, fighting, having some experience within the PFL, Ryzen, some of these other, well-known organizations, but not so much the cream of the crop, so to speak. You pull this guy out of the, you pull this guy up, bring him onto the big show. And unfortunately for him, it just happens to be that he's fighting the descendant of Genghis Khan himself, Myktybek Orolbai. I mean, like, this dude looks like he'd be raiding villages 1,000 years ago. And his fights prove that, high intensity, keeps a good pace, wrestle heavy, will take one to give one, and can take a punch like anyone, like any other person in the UFC, very, very durable guy, huge chin. I don't know if you saw the picture of him if this fight after Rebecki. His one eye's swollen shut. He has like 2 tubes going out of his nose, and it just looked like he got hit by an absolute truck, but tough as nails. Orolbai squeaking his way out of this one, maybe by a sub, but if not, it'll be a pretty comfortable decision in my book.
Yeah, I agree. And I think those are some good points you just made there, Ryan, that I was going to bring up about the activity of Musayev and just the age and activity. You combine those, and now you're fighting the best competition you fought in your career. That just makes it super tough to pick. And also on top of that, he is a striker, and you're going to throw a striker in there against a guy just as grappling heavy as Myktybek Orolbai is. I see Orolbai finding his takedowns and just winning some rounds in there. So, yeah, I'll take Orolbai as well. Moving on to the heavyweight division, we have the 5th-ranked Curtis Blaydes taking on Rizvan Kuniev for probably, which is like the 3rd time this has been booked for, maybe. So hopefully this fight actually happens this time. But this should be another good fight. The odds skewed pretty heavily in Blaydes' favor. He's like a minus 265 favorite, which I find a bit interesting. But yeah, Luke, I'll let you take this one from here.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone watching has seen my record on the Instagram posts, but I need to start switching it up. So I am going Kuniev here. The reason I'm going Kuniev is I think there's something weird going on. A guy fighting for the first time in the UFC, obviously fought Contender Series, but they're booking him on a top 5 opponent for the 3rd time. They clearly want this fight to happen really bad. And I think that's, indicative of something going on here. In addition, I think he's a Dagestani, so he's got good wrestling. He trains also with Big Ank, Magomed Ankalaev. So he has the experience. I know he hasn't fought in the UFC, but he has the experience training with UFC level fighters, UFC champion level fighters. And really, if you look at Curtis Blaydes, his last true win, I feel obviously he beat Almeida, but that was a weird fight. There was a lot of takedowns on Almeida in the first, and he was able to get him out in the second. But other than that, he beat Chris Daukaus. I'm not going to give him credit for the Tom Aspinall with the knee injury. Lost to Pavlovich, lost to Aspinall again. I'm kind of feeling like we might be starting to see the downfall of Curtis Blaydes. With that being said, I also could easily see Curtis Blaydes getting the takedowns if Kuniev can't defend it, and easily working his way to a ground and pound finish. But like I said before, I need a boost in the record, so I'm going the big underdog Kuniev. I got him by decision.
Yeah, I mean it's a really fair pick, Luke. I mean, looking at this fight, I think it's one of the more. I mean, I think the next one's probably a little bit tougher to call. But this is one of the more well matched up fights, and I agree. I mean, the odds are kind of skewed in Curtis Blaydes' favor. Maybe I mean to me, maybe not super fairly, but I do think Curtis Blaydes going to win this fight. He is a guy that I kind of wince at see him in the lineup just because I don't know if he's going to knock somebody out or get knocked out. And that's really just been the story of his career. But on that note, I mean, I think I was on Almeida back when he fought Jailton Almeida pretty heavily. I thought he was going to win, and Curtis Blaydes surprised the hell out of me. I mean, he did. He had a really good performance against a much bigger guy, pretty much in all aspects, and he was able to get him out of there by knockout. So very impressive win there by him. And I don't think that his past losses really, show how good he is as a fighter. I mean, he's losing to cream of the crop guys like Tom Aspinall and Pavlovich, who were just, in their absolute primes, and both of those fights happened. So I don't know. I think Blaydes does a really good job, and he did a really good job against Almeida. Definitely had the takedown and ground game threat there in that fight, probably more so than this one. So I think he'll be able to overcome the challenge. Maybe this guy doesn't have too much film on, but he's definitely gonna be able to defend him. And I got Blaydes. Hoping for a knockout here. I think it'd be pretty exciting. He's been on and off with getting knocked out and knocking people out. So if he could keep that going, keep the fights entertaining, I'm riding with him. So I got Blaydes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just a bit confused as to the matchmaking thought process with this one. I mean, I figured after Shamil Gaziev, they rushed him up in a main event spot in his second fight, and he fought Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And Jairzinho, granted, I don't think he should have been cut from the UFC, no longer with the promotion now, but pretty much had his way with Shamil Gaziev there. I get that the heavyweight division is sort of stagnant when it comes to high level competition. There's not much to speak of outside of your John Jones, obviously your Tom Aspinalls, Volkov, Jailton Almeida, and then outside of those guys and Cyril Gane, you really never know what you're going to get when any of these people step into an octagon. Anyone ranked past number 8, for me at least. But I do feel like this is just such a step up in competition for Kuniev. Has that knockout on Dana White's Contender Series, hasn't fought since. It's really hard, to see a guy, you don't hear much about in terms of, what he's done in his career up to this point, to jump into what would be the top 5 of the heavyweight division, top 6 of the heavyweight division. So for me, I have to go with the proven vet here in Curtis Blaydes. I think there's been a long track of rushing these people. I forget who Strickland beat to get the title shot, on short notice, obviously, but there's another guy from Dagestan knocked out Dustin Stolfus in his debut, and the next thing you know, he's headlining the main event and he gets knocked out in round 2. I see something similar here happening. It's just not a great track record in terms of rushing some of these guys, even though they bear that Dagestani name, and that and come from that region for me. So I'll take Curtis Blaydes here.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Curtis. I think like what Luke said, it is kind of strange to match him up to Curtis Blaydes with a guy like this. I think there's kind of two possibilities. I think one, like Luke said, they're kind of seeing something that maybe the rest of us don't see, or maybe it's just meat for the machine. They're trying to keep like a gatekeeper active. I'm not really sure which one. I guess time will tell. Because definitely not to sound like Anthony Smith, but on paper, Curtis Blaydes definitely has the far stronger resume, and I just don't think there's enough there to really give Kuniev the benefit of the doubt to that extent. Curtis Blaydes is a damn good gatekeeper. I mean, he's lost, but only to the best. He fought the boogeyman of the time, Sergey Pavlovich. Nobody wanted to fight that guy aside from Tom Aspinall, and then obviously he loses to Tom Aspinall in his last fight. But like pretty much every other fight, he's done really damn well. The Almeida fight, I thought he was going to lose that one, but he did a phenomenal job, and I do think it'll be interesting to see Dagestani wrestling versus another style. But I just think there's just Curtis Blaydes just has all the marbles on this one. There's just not enough for me to overturn that. As much as I am kind of a Dagestani homer sometimes, but I don't know if there's enough for me to go all inshallah on this one. So I'll stick with Blaydes.
I guess my thing here is I think Curtis Blaydes really he's proved himself his whole career, but I somehow just am still not bought in on Curtis Blaydes as a fighter. I feel like he's always been somehow consistently overrated. Well, actually, I agree that he's been a top 5 to 10 heavyweight his whole career. I guess that just speaks to how lower level I kind of look at the heavyweight division. And Curtis Blaydes is looked at as this wrestler, which he was, who now just fell in love with his hands and sits there and likes to strike, but doesn't have the best chin. He doesn't have a bad chin, but he doesn't have the best chin either. Like, we've seen him knocked out a numerous number of times, yes, by heavy hitters. I guess my question is Rizvan Kuniev the next heavy hitter? I don't know. Like, I kind of think the odds are just too skewed in Curtis Blaydes' favor, and I'm just not comfortable with those odds. That betting-wise, if I were to bet this, I'd bet on Rizvan Kuniev. And actually, fuck it, I'm going to take him as my pick as well, Luke. I'm joining you here. Give me Kuniev.
We need it. We need some wins against these guys. At least I do. I don't remember.
I kind of do too. I was thinking about it. But moving on to the lightweight division, again, in the lightweight division, we have another banger and probably the biggest fighter on this card, you'd think, fighting in front of his home crowd, would be Rafael Fiziev taking on Ignacio Bahamondes, which, again, is just an absolute banger of a fight. I kind of forget who started the last one. I don't know if it was you, Luke, or if it was you, Son. It was you.
Yeah, I'll
so
take
Son,
this one.
Yeah.
So, like I said in the fight before, I mean, I think this is probably the biggest toss-up of the night. At least for me, it is. I think the main event, there's a lot more stuff to base off than these guys. Not that these guys haven't been fighting, but just very tough matchup. I think size-wise, first of all, is the first thing that jumps at me. I mean, we got 5'8" Fiziev versus 6'3" Bahamondes. Kind of a surprise to me that Bahamondes can even make weight with in the same weight class as Fiziev. But I'm even now, like, I'm about to say it, but I'm having a tough time saying it. I do think Bahamondes wins. Not to take away from Fiziev, I think he's had absolutely great fights in his last few fights. Those Gaethje fights have been nothing but bangers. But I do think that those two fights with Gaethje kind of gave the blueprint to how to beat Fiziev without having to knock him out. And if Ignacio Bahamondes is, as you know, and his team is as good as I think they are, I think they're going to be able to take advantage of that blueprint that's set out for him. Obviously, the reach is huge. He's able to circle around him easier than Justin Gaethje was without engaging him and running the risk of getting knocked out here. Obviously, Fiziev's going to have the crowd on his side. But Bahamondes is a killer, dude. I think it was Noche, not Noche, it was UFC 300 that he fought in. Which is really, like, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but it was a huge card, and I remember calling out, I said, Bahamondes, he's him, dude, he's really fucking nice. So I'm very excited about this fight. I think the UFC did a great job with matchmaking here, very tough one to call, and both fighters have a really good chance of winning, but I do think Bahamondes has a better chance if this comes down to decision. So I'm taking Ignacio Bahamondes here. the Chilean boy, and to take out Rafael on his home turf.
Yeah, son, I do agree with you in the pick here with Bahamondes. And Rafael Fiziev, no joke. I mean, he's a little undersized when it comes to height and reach in the lightweight division. It really hasn't stopped him before, obviously. When you face power hitters or you have to get on the inside of guys like Justin Gaethje, yeah, an uppercut from Justin Gaethje is, it's just like getting hit by a truck. So, no, even, when he gets hit, it's him and he gets hurt. It's him getting cracked by some of the more, the bigger power punchers in the sport. But I do like the size and reach advantage here in terms of height and reach from Bahamondes, especially the striking style, that Muay Thai striking style, which they both share, is who will utilize it more with that big reach advantage. I think Bahamondes should be able to keep him on the outside, leg kicks and all that, use his jab at range, throw the 1-2 and just pepper him and probably coast his way to a decision. If not finding a knockout, I don't see this fight going to the ground. And even if it does, Bahamondes, his last win by sub against Jalen Turner, who was also no slouch in the grappling department. And the guy's only 27 years old. He's still improving. He's getting better every time. He trains with champions. He's in the same gym as Bilal Muhammad. So they train together. He's with that high level competition. And I do like Bahamondes here. I think his time, I think it's time for him to start rising the ranks. And Rafael Fiziev's a good test.
Dan, you?
Yeah, I go. This is kind of tough. I mean, like you guys touched on, it's such a toss up. I mean, in some respects, it almost seems like a mini version of Rountree versus Pereira. You have kickboxing and versus obviously Muay Thai and Fiziev. It's just tough because I don't see a fighter as talented as Fiziev now dropping 4 in a row. It's just I can't believe a guy with that level of skill has dropped. He had the leg injury TKO loss to Mateus Gamrot, sandwiched in between 2 decision losses to Justin Gaethje, and I don't know that I see him dropping a 4th. Like, that's really crazy to think about. But at the same time, you do have to give Bahamondes his respect. I mean, he's coming off 3 back-to-back performances of the night. He had that great last win against Jalen Turner. He has a lot of the physical advantages and attributes, the reach, the length. He has the youth on his side as well. I think I just don't see Fiziev losing 4 in a row. I think I have to go with Rafael on this one. No real groundbreaking analysis. I don't see him dropping 4.
Yeah, Dan, I'm going to split us up here. I am also on Fiziev here. I agree with everything you said. I think the level of competition is just that much higher for Fiziev at this point in his career. Obviously, it's not a hit on Bahamondes. He's working his way up to that. He's still young, still really entering before his prime, when you expect the prime to be between 30 and 32 years old in the UFC. I think you just really look back to that Ludwig Klein fight. Obviously, Bahamondes has learned a lot. He's won 3 straight, like you guys said, 3 performance awards for those 3 wins. But similar size to Fiziev, and also the ability to get into the pocket and really hit hard. I think the kicks here are really going to play a detrimental part to Bahamondes from Fiziev here. I have him, just grinding out, the Tiger Muay Thai coach at this point in his career. I have him grinding out a decision victory. I even went back and watched the last Gaethje fight, so the second one. And other than that, the uppercut that caught him, Fiziev, he was really kind of having his way. He was landing a lot of body kicks. He was doing a good job. Obviously, that he got rocked there, and it ultimately led him to losing that decision. But like you said, I can't see him dropping 4 in a row. He's too high caliber to drop 4 in a row. So I got him winning here in his home turf.
Dude, my problem is that these Valley Flow guys have just made me eat crow nonstop. Every time I pick against them, I lose. I pick on them, I lose. I just don't know what to do with this gym. It's tough. But I'm not betting against Ignacio Bahamondes again here. And I think what it mainly came down to for me was it seems like Rafael Fiziev, like that first fight against Justin Gaethje, I very well think he could have won that fight if he just put out more output come round 3. And I just don't feel confident in him holding up over 3 hard rounds just with that gas tank. It almost seems like he holds up because he's scared of his gas tank, because he has kind of gassed a little bit prior. And I think just the size advantage of Bahamondes, as well as just the consistent output that he has, because that guy does throw. I think just the output as well as the size will be a little bit much for Fiziev, especially if he doesn't get that output going early. But one thing before we go on to the main event, I forgot to mention about Kuniev in that fight against Curtis Blaydes. He did beat Renan Ferreira in the PFL and then got caught juicing. Like, he was completely roided up. So I wonder, with this fight being in Baku, if that is a possibility there. I don't think it's going to be as strict if it was in the Americas. So just a little, throw that out there. He has been on the juice, so who knows what's going to happen there. But moving over to the lightweight division, our main event, we have Jamahal Hill taking on Khalil Rountree. I don't think either of these guys really need an intro. Ryan, you're up.
Shit, can I pass?
I'm
kidding. For me, it's like you could kind of flip a coin on this one. I think if these guys fight 10 times, one guy's winning 5 times, the other guy's winning 5 times. I mean, these two are so even, like so stylistically even, in terms of just like caliber of competition, who they've fought, impressive wins on both sides. When Khalil first came into the UFC, it's a little bit of an up and down career, but from the last like 2-3 years, this guy's really found his own. Was number 8 ranked when he stepped in against Alex Pereira. And a lot of people were saying, this guy doesn't deserve the title shot, but he showed the world that he can bang and he can hang and bang with the best of them. Looked very impressive up until that 3rd round, where he kind of just like lost the plot a little bit, gassed out up at high elevation, and then Pereira was able to find the finish. But what do you expect when you face Alex Pereira? And then in terms of Jamahal Hill, it's the same thing. He joins the UFC, loses to Paul Craig, but then just goes on an absolute heater. Just KOing guys left and right. Johnny Walker, unanimous win against Glover Teixeira for the belt. Unfortunately, while having the belt, tore his Achilles. And then it was just a little bit downhill from there. Once again, you have to step in the octagon with the likes of Yuri Prohaska and Alex Pereira, just some of the more unorthodox, better strikers of the division. And for me, it's the same way. It comes down to how you and Dan, or Luke and Dan here, picked Rafael Fiziev. Is I don't see Jamahal Hill dropping 3 in a row. In my mind, I just don't see it happening. So I'm gonna take the guy who's plus money, even though if it's just slight underdog. But like you said, with that, the guys are both skilled, but I do not see Jamahal Hill dropping 3 here. So give me Jamahal Hill.
Dan, you're up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh God, I'm gonna have to eat my words a little bit now because I'm going the opposite direction. Like I don't see him losing this. Now I might have to eat some crow myself. But I think this is it's a really close fight. And I think they're kind of in the same predicament, right? They're both coming off losses. Obviously Jamahal Hill back to back. But it's kind of like you win and you're back in title contention. You lose and it's very easy to slowly slip back into irrelevancy. Like that's kind of a slippery slope they're both treading. I would say Jamahal Hill a little bit more so. I think the thing is with Jamahal, I know he's hated by a lot of the fan base, but I do think he's a skilled, dangerous fighter, of course. And the thing I think a lot of people forget is that he's very accurate. And he has in this fight, he's coming in with a reach advantage. So I think Khalil is certainly the more dynamic striker. Jamal's a little bit more boxing heavy. Khalil, he's matured a little bit. He's ever since training hella Muay Thai, he's just all these crazy kicks and stuff coming from all different angles. But I think if Jamahal can kind of slow that down a little bit, use that jab, kind of pressure him. I mean, Khalil is there to be hit. He's shown that he's he can be targeted. And the same thing with Jamahal. I mean, we both saw, if you follow the whole family tree, Alex Pereira is, kind of beating both of these guys. But I just think Khalil is on a better trajectory right now. I think I'm always kind of reluctant to give guys too much credit for a loss because I think you kind of fall into this whole Michael Chandler type of situation. But I think he showed enough maturity in that fight. He showed enough in that fight with the dynamic striking that he can hang with, possibly one of the most decorated combat sports athletes of all time. And I just think, after watching the Yuri Prohaska fight, I could see Khalil Rountree certainly take advantage of some things. So I think where they're at right now, I would give Khalil Rountree a very slight edge.
Yeah, we run into this a lot on this podcast where it's very much a toss-up. I actually did not have a pick in my notes here going into this fight. I wanted to hear everyone's opinion. Um, I think you guys hit on a lot of the aspects, the technicality. You got the boxing edge in Jamahal Hill. Throws a really good 1-2. If he hits you, lights normally go out. If he misses you, he's very susceptible to counter strikes. Looking back on that Yuri fight, I think what won Yuri that fight was his counter striking, which formed from his head movement. He was able to, dip and slip a lot of the strikes and was right in position to hit Jamahal Hill with a couple of big counter strikes that I think won him that fight. The thing with Muay Thai, obviously Ryan, you touched on it. Khalil's got a great striking, better kicks. Definitely overall, I think a more entertaining style of striking in Muay Thai just in general. But you keep your head very still normally and have that high guard in that fighting background. So if I think Yuri laid out the blueprint how to beat Jamahal Hill. As you move your head, you don't get hit with the big 1-2s, and you're able to counter strike. I don't know if Khalil has that ability to break off of his Muay Thai background. And I think also a big thing for Khalil is going to be the leg kicks, just because I don't care who you are, what sport you play, you tear your Achilles, you're going to be affected, especially when leg kicks are involved in any sport. It's tough, man. This is a really tough fight because I like Jamahal Hill. I know he's not a fan favorite like you hit on, Dan, but he's really good still. I still think he's part of that, the big 3, big 4 of this weight class. Oh, man. I'm going to go Jamahal Hill, man. I'm going to go Jamahal Hill here. I really don't know who to pick here. This is a toss-up one, but I think I'm going to lean Jamahal Hill. I think he just might have that slight power advantage, and I don't think the head movement's going to be enough to get out of the way. I think this is a tough one, but I think Jamahal Hill gets it done in the 4th or the 5th.
Yeah, I mean, really not too much to touch on. I am glad you picked Jamahal Hill for me, so I don't have to. Because I'm going to go Khalil Rountree here. Hate to say it, though, because I absolutely love Jamahal Hill. I have a lot of respect for him. I think if he had he not torn his Achilles when he was champion, I think he would have had a really good chance to get a few defenses there, at least until Alex gets in there. But my thing is just, I think from Khalil Rountree's side, I think with a fight like he had with Alex Pereira, I think you learn so much. I think that was probably the most surprising outcome out of any fight that I've watched, in recent memory. Is him going 4 rounds and just absolutely eating punches, kicks left and right, maintaining his posture and putting up a very, very good fight until the last second. Obviously ultimately getting taken out in that 4th round, but I think Ryan, you said it. I mean, he matured a lot, and definitely going into that fight, I think he was a different Khalil Rountree than I expected. And my thing with Jamahal Hill, not to take away from any of his greatness, because I do think he's a spectacular fighter. I think once those leg kicks start coming into play, it's definitely going to cause some problems for his Achilles and maybe wherever his, any other, old aches he's been dealing with. And then I think just in his last fight with Yuri, I had Jamahal Hill winning that fight. And what I saw from him was not the Jamahal Hill I expected. And so I think it's just going to be kind of tough for me to look back on his last performance and see how he kind of, stood up with Yuri Prochazka, and then got knocked out there. I think that was kind of, the nail in the coffin. So I'm going Khalil Rountree here. I think he can get it done by knockout. I think he's going to be putting himself in the right position to knock him out. And yeah, that's what I'm running with. Khalil Rountree.
You make me want to switch.
Dude, I'm going to be honest here. It's just
so
watching
hard.
Jamahal Hill in his last fight against Yuri Prochazka, I thought he just looked, honestly, very bad. It's one of those things where you're coming off multiple injuries. He had the knockout to Alex. He took that on. Then he goes and fights Yuri after not even a crazy amount of time off. And he took a beat down, bro, 2 knockdowns. Wasn't pretty. And that was just 4 months ago. Makes me a little scared about what Jamahal Hill is going to look like here. When did he start? It's like one of those things, man, where it's like you're not young. You're 34 years old, coming back after 4 months after just a grueling fight with Yuri Prochazka, in which, to your point, Luke, he managed to make Yuri Prochazka have good head movement. When does that guy ever have actually what's the word I'm looking for? Head movement that works, effective head movement? Pretty much never. And Jamahal Hill managed to make Yuri's head movement effective. So I just can't really trust this guy right now. And I got to side with Khalil Rountree here. I just think the injuries and the quick turnaround here isn't helping Jamahal Hill's case. And who knows, man? Like, both these guys are coming off grueling fights, so it's going to be interesting to see how they both look.
Yeah, that's a tough one, dude. Now, like, I wish I was just a third party listening to this podcast because I might be different. But yeah, it's a good fight night. Back to back good fight nights by the UFC here.
I think events in general, like even the ones coming up in the next 2 weeks, I think like the 2 month stretch we have, starting from the last, two events have been really turning up for the best, after a little bit of a hiatus of good cards.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have the talent. It's just that's what happens when you get out of the Apex, and you have more of an incentive to put asses in seats.
Yeah,
this is the cards get better as long as you're actually somewhere outside of a 200-person mini dorm in the UFC headquarters. But that's just my take on it.
100%. And with that being said, I'd like to kick it over to Dan. Dan just put out a nice article on our Around the Felt Sports website, and we're going to touch on that and give our takes on it. So, Dan, take it from here.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely I was excited to do a list like this, and I also understand that no matter who you pick, you're going to get people calling you a casual. It's just kind of the way it goes. It's inherently dissentious, people that's part of what makes it fun. I see these lists all the time, on various websites, and I think sometimes it's kind of overdone. So I did want to introduce a couple stipulations on my article, because usually when you see a list like this, who's the first people you think of? You think of Fedor, you think of Dan Henderson, you think of, some people even say Cowboy, Carlos Condit, etc. There's a ton of names that are thrown in there, and I thought it was more prudent to kind of throw in some guys that are never mentioned, and who I thought it was more fitting to the piece to kind of just throw in guys who were never champions ever, like not WEC, not Strikeforce, not anything else, just guys, UFC fighters who were never champion ever, who maybe deserve to be, and in another life maybe they could have been. So I chose, obviously, I mean, if anybody that reads my articles, hopefully a lot of you, I'm Dustin Poirier has to be on there. That's my personal fight. That's my personal favorite. I know the Glaze is probably getting a little out of control. I've had Diamonds by Rihanna playing in my car for like the last month or so. I'm so excited for his fight with Max Holloway. But I think he definitely has to be there. He's a name that you see on a lot of these lists. Obviously he's fought some of the most nearly unbeatable guys of his era. I mean, Khabib, I know he gets a lot of flack for retiring early. People, kind of disrespect him sometimes, but I mean, he was incredibly dominant during his run, and there's no shame in losing to him. And then he fights Oliveira during his rise to the title. And Oliveira's a submission wizard. He's tapping guys out left and right. He has the record for the most finishes in the UFC, most submissions, et cetera, et cetera. And then he fights Islam Makhachev, who, if Islam becomes champion at welterweight, he may even be in the GOAT conversation. If he fights, if he defends, if he comes back down to lightweight defense, who knows? Like, that loss probably ages a lot better. And, there's no shame in losing to those guys. But Dustin Poirier has also he's also arguably better than a lot of the champions that have come and gone. And he has, I think, the best resume you could possibly have without actually being a champion. You look at the champions he's beaten. He's beaten Pettis. He's beaten Eddie Alvarez. He's beaten McGregor twice. He beat the interim champ, Justin Gaethje. I mean, there's so many, he's universally lauded as having one of the best resumes ever for good reason. So I think he has to be on there. That was my little fan fiction dissertation. I'm sorry if I went on a little bit of a tangent there. But then you got Alexander Gustafsson. I think that's another name you see on a lot of these lists, and I think he absolutely has to be on there. I mean, that fight with that one particular fight with Jones, I believe the first one, that fight of the night, where he, was one of the first guys to really make Jones look vulnerable. And this is not the John Jones now where he's at heavyweights fighting, 50-year-old Stipe. This was when he was really at the height of his, light heavyweight reign, or at least, beginning it. And he was the first guy to take Jones down and make him look vulnerable. That was an incredibly competitive fight. And I think a lot of the other guys that he's fought, Daniel Cormier, right? That was another incredibly competitive fight. And Daniel Cormier, if John Jones does not exist, gets far more respect. He was a phenomenal fighter. He was the first fighter in UFC history to defend 2 belts. I mean, like, he's right up there with the best of them. A lot of the other guys he fought Shogun, he fought Glover Teixeira, I believe. He fought Anthony Rumble Johnson. I mean, you look at his resume, the guys he's beaten, and also the guys he lost to. I mean, Daniel Cormier and John Jones, it doesn't get any better than that. And he was just one step right below him, incredibly close, within a hair's breadth. I think third, you have to have Joseph Benavidez. I think that's a name that you don't hear too much, but when you look at his resume, you look at the tape, you look at the guys he's fought, absolutely has to be there. He's at flyweight, I guess sometimes like they don't get the respect they deserve, or maybe because he's been retired for a few years, some of the newer fans forget him. But he's fought some of the best names, beat a lot of them. And the guys he lost to, you can't really blame him for not becoming a champion. I mean, the guy had to fight Demetrius Johnson, of all people. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Arguably the GOAT of the whole sport. He had to fight Davison Figueiredo, who was a force of nature at flyweight. I mean, that guy was terrifying. And that was at the tail end of Benavidez' career as well. And he had to fight prime Dominic Cruz in the WEC. And Dominic Cruz, cream of the crop at bantamweight, arguably the best. So he's had 5 chances to win world titles across the WEC and the UFC, 4 in the UFC and once in the WEC. I mean, he's had 5 championship opportunities, unfortunately lost all of them, but can you really blame him for losing to the Mount Rushmore at the time, So I think he has to be there, not a champion, but the next best thing. And then you have to have Yoel Romero. I think we all know Romero's freak athleticism, how long he's been in the game. I believe the guy is still active right now at around 48, 49 years old, which is absolutely insane that he's still competing. Fought Israel Adesanya for the title. And I mean, Izzy, before he went on a little bit of decline, was absolutely insane. He was incredibly skilled. He was one of the best kickboxers we've ever seen. And he was one of those guys like Kamaru Usman at the height of his reign. He just seemed unstoppable. Like, who was going to beat this guy? And then he fought, obviously, Robert Whittaker, we all know that's no slouch either. And I mean, he entered MMA at a late age too, after, collecting some accolades in wrestling. So I think during his stage in the game, when he entered, what he was able to accomplish, what he's been able to maintain over such a lengthy and illustrious career, as well as like his presence, not to use brain rot words, but like his aura, like how terrifying that guy was. He has to be on there, I believe. This last 5th spot, I think, was the biggest toss-up for me, because there's so many good candidates here. You could have put Tony Ferguson. You could have put Justin Gaethje. I did try, due to the stipulations I put in the article, I did kind of try to stay away from putting in active fighters because, I don't think it's likely, but Justin Gaethje could go on to become a fight for the title and possibly win, depending on things shake out. I don't think it's incredibly likely, but it could happen. You could a couple of friends I was talking to also said Corey Sandhagen. Also, we know that he has a chance to he probably should soon fight for the title, has a chance to win, fine fighter. I put Chad Mendes. I kind of wanted for reasons I'll get into, but also I think that's a name you don't hear too much. And at the very least, I know sometimes we hear a lot of the same names. Even if people don't agree with me, I was hoping at least I introduce a name that's not seen as much, that's equally as deserving, to just, spice up the conversation a little bit. I think he was one of the kind of first pioneers in the UFC featherweight division in terms of wrestling, in terms of what he introduced to the division. You look at the guys he fought. He fought Jose Aldo, who I believe deserves to be in the GOAT conversation for what he's accomplished. Went undefeated for 10 years, record for most featherweight title defenses with 8. Incredible fighter in the WEC and UFC. His longevity, he just retired recently. I mean, the guy is up there with the best of them. And then he fought Conor McGregor, which I know Conor's not considered to be like the best of all time or anything. But I mean, you look at his featherweight run, especially, the guy just seemed like he had plot armor. Nobody was stopping that guy. Before that guy hopped on cocaine, nobody was stopping that guy. So, and I think, the second fight with Jose Aldo when I was doing my analysis on Jose Aldo, that was an incredibly competitive fight. Mendes did a lot of great things there. And I think, as with a lot of these other guys, yes, he lost, but only to the best. And you look at his skill and his accomplishments, I think he at least deserves to be in the conversation.
100%. Luke, I'll let you take it from here if you have anyone to add on to that.
Yeah, no, Dan, I read your article, looking forward to you hopping on the podcast. I 100% agree with your number one. That's who my number one would be from a pure skill perspective. Dustin Poirier's been in there, like you said, with some of the best. Obviously got the BMF belt, but we're not considering that a championship belt. And so close. I mean, you think about, I believe he had Charles rocked in the first round, and then also had that, guillotine against Khabib that was so close. Even Khabib says it was super close and didn't get there. And a guy who we're now looking, down the barrel of retirement against a Max Holloway, which obviously, me, I want Max Holloway to win that fight, but it's terrible for me as a fan of Max Holloway because I love Dustin Poirier so much, just as much. When we were talking about this, texting during the week and thinking about who I wanted to be, the greatest, I kind of stayed away from, after reading your article, like the skill level and like who was deserving and who was the highest level, and more so of like what would be beneficial to the UFC and in terms of having it in your grasp. And I took Chael Sonnen, man. Just looking back, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys go through YouTube, and UFC only posts like certain old fights. They post the Anderson Silva fight all the time, and I watch it every time it comes across my, suggested. And he was so freaking close to having that belt. He dominated that fight. I think he was up 4-0 going into that 5th round, and obviously got choked out with 2 minutes left in the 5th to lose his belt. Credit to Anderson Silva, great champion and everything. But think about now, fast forward, 15, that was, oh my God, 15 years ago that fight was. Chael Sonnen's doing Ultimate Fighter. He's on with DC. He's such a big part of the UFC worldwide. He's such a big shit talker, probably the second best shit talker of all time. Just imagine the influence and the more, like you said, brain rot word aura of Chael Sonnen if he was able to get that belt. So for me, when I just think about guys, so close, and maybe not the skill level. He went on a tangent where he lost a bunch of fights, had another 2 shots at the belt, lost to John Jones, lost to Anderson Silva again. But I just wish Chael Sonnen had the belt one time. I think his shit talking gets taken to another level, and maybe we even see him continue to be better in the UFC, because we kind of saw the downfall after that. But yeah, for me, it's Chael Sonnen, just because I would love to see him with the belt.
Yeah, look, I'm kind of pissed you brought it up because I absolutely love Chael Sonnen as a pick. Sorry, Dan, I know I cut you off there. But yeah, Chael Sonnen's great. I think he would have been an amazing champion. And I don't know where you got second from, man. I really think he's the best shit talker to ever grace a UFC mic.
Well,
like
I'm giving it McGregor, man.
Dude, fuck McGregor. I think McGregor and Chael Sonnen shit talk battle. I think Chael takes that any day of the week. But that's another conversation for another day. Maybe we'll do a segment over it. Dan, very happy you brought up Joseph Benavidez. That's a guy that I think gets overlooked a lot in the UFC history books. You don't really think of Joseph Benavidez, I think, unless you're really big into him back in the day, in the UFC back in the day. But he fought for the title 4 times. I think it consistently had like really high level performance. He was like, to me, one of the earlier guys that I remember having that kind of mixed martial arts background rather than, just being a striker, just being a grappler, and whatnot. So, I think he was like one of the first like pioneers of being well-rounded. Obviously he wasn't the first and definitely wasn't the last. I just think like to nowadays how we have fighters that are kind of hybrids. That's the guy that really stuck out to me. Obviously fighting Demetrius Johnson, in my opinion, the greatest pound for pound fighter of all time. I know I'll probably get hate for that. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. Demetrius Johnson is the GOAT to me. Davison Figueiredo too, obviously, right in his prime. So just 2 goated fighters that he had to go up against there, for example. But for me, the guy that hasn't been mentioned yet, it's Dan Henderson. Middleweight, lightweight, light heavyweight guy, super good. Obviously, definitely a legend you think of when you think about, the GOATs of the sport. Maybe, not a GOAT in the sense of, greatest of all time, but definitely one of the main pioneers that comes to mind for me. He was an icon in MMA in general, not only in UFC. He was one of the pioneers. Like I said, he was huge in Pride, huge in Strikeforce, champion in both. But he just couldn't replicate that in the UFC. So he fought for gold 3 times. He never won it. But, you know, when you think about it, who he fought was Rampage Jackson, Anderson Silva, and Michael Bisping. You know, arguably some of the greatest guys to ever go in that division. At that era, in that middleweight and lightweight division, you know, was just unreal. So Dan Henderson's the guy that comes to mind, really, that, you know, I really wish he would have got a belt. I think it would have really solidified the rest of his legacy. Obviously, he spent a lot of his, you know, really good fighting years in Pride and Strikeforce, which at the time, like we mentioned before in the past, were, you know, elite promotions. UFC wasn't exactly running the show as much as it is now. But, you know, maybe that's also to reinforce the point. UFC's always been, you know, the greatest competition. Granted, why he did not win a championship. So I got Dan Henderson as one of the guys that definitely deserve a championship. Not, you know, when I think the best fighters to never get one, definitely him. But 100% agree with the Joseph Benavidez pick. Great call there.
Yeah. So I'm just about gonna be grasping at straws here. I had the Chael Sonnen pick from Luke, and then, you know, Joseph Benavidez, you can get behind it. And Dan, I loved all 5 guys that you mentioned. You know, even you sprinkle in, you mentioned that 5th guy and Chad Mendez. You know, you could put Tony Ferguson in there. I don't count that either. You know, the 12-fight skid. So it's gonna be a little unorthodox here, and I'm just really pulling this one out of my ass now. I got 2 guys that came to mind. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, and the first one would be the Korean Zombie, my favorite fighter of all time. You know, I look at his record. I know it ain't pretty, but, you know, comes into the UFC, beats Mark Hominick in 7 seconds, who at the time was a force, you know, to be reckoned with, gets the first twister submission in UFC history, and then has to fight a prime Jose Aldo. That sucks. You know, Jose Aldo dispatches of him, you know, in the 3rd round. He also dislocated his shoulder in that fight, and then takes a 4-year layup to go do mandatory Korean military service in his prime. Comes back to the UFC 4 years later, you know, and he looks like he's never left. Granted, you know, there were some ups and downs, you know, but he went on a 3-fight win streak, knocked out Renato Moicano when he was at featherweight, ranked number 4 at the time. And people forget, when Renato Moicano was at featherweight, he was also one of those guys that was a force to be reckoned with, you know, on the come up, you know, just a little bit, you know, he couldn't, you know, a little bit of time cutting weight and all that, you know, a little bit of a rough one, moved up to, moved up to lightweight. You know, he's had some pretty good success there, making a name for himself on the mic and with his performances in the octagon. Is well on his way to beating Yair Rodriguez to what at that point would have given him a title fight a little bit earlier in his career. You know, and unfortunately with 1 second left, you know, they go for that final like Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje type flurry, and you just get caught. So, you know, he has to bounce back. He gets a really comfortable win over power hitters like Dan Ige. And then obviously he fights a prime Volk. And you know how it goes. The story of his career, it's the 2 guys he had to fight for the title, or the 2 arguable goats of that division. You know, you go either way with those guys. You know, there's still that debate between Alexander Volkanovski and Jose Aldo. And then my second guy that I'm thinking off the top of my head here is Rory McDonald. You know, at the time, made his UFC debut when he was 20 years old. You know, went 1-1, you know, in his first 2 fights, but his first loss in the UFC was to guys like Carlos Condit, you know, who one of those guys that you could argue is one of the best to never do it as well. Then goes on a 5-fight win streak, also beating the likes of guys like BJ Penn, and then loses to Robbie Lawler in a split decision, who then went on to get the belt. And then moving on from that, he beats a prime Damian Maia, and then he beats Tyron Woodley on the come up, another one of those guys, you know, to hold the belt in the welterweight division. And then if you watch that fight back, and if you look at the scorecards, when he did end up fighting Robbie Lawler for the second time, you know, where he did get finished in the 5th round, he was winning that fight 3 rounds to 1. And at the time, he was only 24, 25 years old. Like when people looked at Rory McDonald at the time he fought Robbie Lawler for the championship, everyone thought this guy, you know, he was the future of the MMA, of mixed martial arts. That's what they call him. So well-rounded, you know, one of like the first guys, you know, at that time that really could just do it all, laid a beating, good from everywhere. Unfortunately, you know, he wasn't able to come up with gold that night. And I think the UFC and the welterweight division would have looked a lot different from a history perspective had he beat Robbie Lawler that night. And then he loses to Stephen Thompson and then just transitions on to the PFL. I mean, this guy's only 35 years old, but he's retired now. And it's just like one of those things I look at. It's like what could have, you know, like what could have been in that sense. But those are my 2 guys. I like the Jose Benavidez pick. I had the Chael Sonnen one in my mind going into this thing, but yeah, I had to come up with 2. There's something, but Dan, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, if I can just interject here, I thought, well, Chael Sonnen was, you know, he's kind of disqualified because he was a champion. He was undefeated, undisputed, and never lost a round. So I automatically excluded him. But nah, just kidding. But yeah, that was definitely there were so many great, even like as I was looking at some of like the guys these people fought, like Stephen Thompson, like Anthony Rumble Johnson. I mean, there's just looking back on it, there's just so many great guys. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have done this guy. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, fellas.
Yeah, you guys honestly took about all the fighters I had on my list out from under me. I was gonna maybe potentially mention Justin Gaethje's career is not over yet, like you touched on there, Dan. Tony Ferguson you could throw in there, but yeah, a little tough with how his career ended. But I guess one other guy, just to mention it because I listen to his podcast pretty frequently. I'll give it to Kenny Florian. I know he had a bunch of shots there at the belt. I want to say he had 3 there. I know he lost to BJ Penn and Jose Aldo. All the guys are talking about that loss to Jose Aldo. That's wild. But I wouldn't say Kenny Florian was one of the best to never win it, but he was just another guy that came to mind that was always around in contention, multiple cracks at the belt. And I'm just a fan of his as well. So I'll give him a shout out here. But outside of that, that's about all I got. I don't know if any of you fellas have anything else you want to add in here.
No, that's it for me.
With that being said, thank you all for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll be back soon with some exciting news. So be sure to tune in.